Hi, and welcome to Coffee at the Crossroads. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you for joining me. If you're a returning viewer or subscriber, thank you for joining me again. Happy to have you here. Today, I'm going to talk about something that might be a little bit controversial, but hopefully gets you to kind of think about things a little bit differently and maybe add a little excitement and pizzazz to your life. And the topic today is talking to strangers. I think, that's like people go, whoa, people have an aversion to that. And we kind of are like, whoa, and yet studies have shown that actually talking to strangers is quite good for you. And so we're going to get into that. I want to cover a few things. I want to cover why we don't, why we should, and then I want to give you a kind of a fantastic example from my personal experience where talking to strangers was really beneficial. I think just in general, we think of strangers as like, we're raised as kids like, it's a scary, there's a crazy person over there or something, right? But the reality is we talk to strangers all the time, right? When you go in to, order a coffee, you're talking to someone probably that you don't know. When you buy a pair of, when you buy a hat or buy a pair of pants or buy anything, you're probably talking to a salesperson that you don't know. When you negotiate your mortgage or you buy a new car or whatever, anytime you're out in public, chances are you're talking to a stranger anyway. But for whatever reason, when you walk into the bank, even though you don't know the person on the other side, they don't feel like a stranger, but that's just a perception thing, right? The reality is, they are a stranger, right? So let's jump in. So why don't we talk to strangers? Well, I think there's a few things behind that. First off, we're raised to not talk to strangers, right? Like all of us have heard this story, right? Like, okay, kids, heading off to school, make sure you have your books, make sure you have everything, and don't talk to strangers, right? Like that kind of thing. And so as kids, we're automatically sort of, conditioned to not talk to anybody that we don't know. And obviously there's a safety, sort of factor in that we don't, whatever. But right from a very early age, we're kind of taught that, hey, we shouldn't talk to strangers. But studies have shown that actually as we get older, when we're not afraid of every person we meet, there's a couple of reasons why we don't talk to strangers. One is because we think they are going to somehow trap us, or we're going to be trapped in boring conversation with somebody that we don't know, and we're going to be awkwardly trying to get out of it. What's interesting is the biggest reason that people don't talk to strangers is because they're afraid that they're boring. Right? They're like, oh, that person doesn't want to talk to me. Oh, why would they, what am I going to say? And what if they think I'm weird or whatever? Then that's really telling, right? It's sort of like we all have this insecurity about talking to new people, right? When, as we've talked about in other videos, that social fitness and engagement with other people is hugely important. And so, the way that you make friends and the way that you engage with people is by talking to them, right? By smiling and saying hello to someone. And so it's sort of, we're in this cycle where we don't want to talk to strangers for various reasons. Either we're afraid, or we think they're going to be boring, or we think we're going to be boring. And that kind of creates a loneliness around us, right? You're sitting on the train, or you're riding the bus, or you're, somewhere, you're sitting in Starbucks or whatever it is, and you're like, oh, don't talk to anybody, and that's kind of sad, right? That's not what life is about, right? We should be interacting with people. Humans are social creatures, right? And the way that we socialize and we build social fitness is by talking to people. And the way we meet people is by, you guessed it, talking to strangers, right? So those are the reasons why we don't. Now let's talk about the reasons why we should. And we've kind of covered some of it, right? Is that if you don't want to be in your shell and you don't want to be, kind of isolated, then talking to people is a way to kind of broaden your horizons and to build that social fitness and practice social fitness and social interaction, right? Studies have found that it reduces loneliness. It improves your sense of well-being in as much as you kind of feel better about yourself. There was a study where in the States where they had people who rode the train, they had them just ask them to strike up a conversation with a stranger on the train. And across the board, all of them felt they were happier throughout the day. That one interaction kind of just gives a new perspective, and it kind of breaks you out of that kind of isolated kind of shell, right? Studies have also shown that talking to strangers increases creativity. Which we can all use, right? So again, I think it's probably about, broadening your mind and seeing a different perspective and getting those synapses firing, right? You're like, oh, suddenly I've kind of got to be on the ball because I'm talking to someone new, right? I can't just go through the motions and whatever. I've got to actually kind of be in the moment. And that improves our creativity. The final thing is, and this is my own sort of little addition to it, is that I think that talking to strangers enhances memory. When you go somewhere or you do something or you're in some new environment and you choose to talk to a stranger, that brings all of that stuff into focus for you. And so invariably you're going to remember that much more likely. You were at the opera, or you went to a hockey game, or you went to see a football match, or whatever it is. And if you stopped and took the time to speak to a stranger, the chances are you're going to remember that interaction, and then it's going to crystallize that whole event for you. And I've got a personal experience where I did that when my wife and I went traveling. So let me set the stage here. So it was our 20th anniversary, and we had some travel points, and I kind of surprised my wife. I was like, hey, look, we were living in Halifax, Nova Scotia at the time, and we decided as a gift for our 20th anniversary, which is in June, I was going to whisk her away to New York City for a 4-day weekend. And so that was the gift. I hadn't booked tickets or anything, but then I said, hey, we're going to do this. And so we had we had some travel points, we had whatever. And we booked 4 days in Manhattan on the July 4th long weekend. Interestingly, we expected it was just going to be throngs of people, and turns out Manhattan's pretty dead in July relative to other times of the year, because July 4th, it's a big weekend in the States, and people get out of Dodge, kind of, right? So anyway, we flew to New York. And I just kind of made it my mission that I was going to talk to people in New York City. And so the very first interaction, we flew in quite late, and we took a taxi from the airport into downtown, and we got talking to the cabbie, and he was from Tibet, and he had been a Tibetan monk. Crazy story, his stepmother, kind of evil stepmother, his dad had remarried, and his stepmother didn't want the kids, so she put him in the monastery when he was 6. And then he was a monk till he was into his 20s. For like 20 years he was a monk, and then he kind of was like, I don't want to do this. And so he left Tibet and moved to the States and became a cabbie. So I don't know how you feel about that. I think that's awesome. But anyway, that was the start of our trip. So throughout the trip, we just talked to people, and we met the woman who did like the cleaning of the hotel where we were staying. She was from Poland. We went out to this Irish pub, and we met this young lady who was like from Ireland, working in this Irish pub, and she had come to New York to follow a boy, and went into this other shop where this guy had moved to to Manhattan, moved to New York from Greece in the 70s, and he had got this shop when it was like run down and nobody wanted to be there, and he got this cheap shop, and he had seen how Manhattan had changed from the 70s right through, this was 2016, so 40 years of change, and it was incredible to talk to him. But it really hit home. We went out for dinner. We decided, because it was our anniversary, we were going to do some fine dining in New York. And one of the places we booked was the Nomad. And I don't know if you know about the Nomad, but at the time it was one of the great restaurants in New York City. And we'd also booked the next night at the Gramercy Tavern in Gramercy. So these are two pretty high-end restaurants, but we were kind of splashing out because it was our 20th anniversary and all that stuff. So we went out for dinner, and it's July 4th, remember? And we went into the Nomad, and we got a drink, and we were waiting for our table, and we got a drink, got chatting with the guy behind the bar. He was from San Diego, and then our maitre d' was a guy named Chasen, who was originally, I think, from Connecticut, and we started realizing that all these people in New York are very often from somewhere else, right? So we got talking to Chasen, and then our sommelier was a guy named Christian. Can't remember where he was from, but he was from somewhere else as well. And Chasen had started his career at a McDonald's and had sort of worked his way up in McDonald's into management, and then started working at other restaurants. And now he was the maitre d' of the Nomad, which is like one of the great restaurants in New York City, right? So we're learning all this stuff, and we're kind of hanging out. We end up having drinks and having absolutely amazing dinner, and there's a table beside us, a couple that are a little bit older than us. He's a lawyer from Philadelphia, and they happen to come to the Nomad, periodically. It's their favorite restaurant, and we start talking to other people, and we're just interacting with strangers all the time, and it seems like the whole kind of buzz around us sort of swells to a point where people in the restaurant are coming to our table to meet us. People from the kitchen are coming out. There was kitchen staff coming out. There was two of them who were originally from Puerto Rico, and they wanted to meet us, and they wanted to tell us their story. And they had come. They'd worked in kitchens all over, and they finally ended up working in the Nomad, again, one of the great kitchens in New York. And we met. There was other travelers there that were from California that were sitting near us, and we chatted with them. Finally, near the end of the night, keep in mind we've had drinks and we've had amazing food, Chasen comes over and he says, "Hey, listen, I understand you're here for your anniversary." He gives us a little bottle of bubbly, a little glass of bubbly each. We have our little champagne, and he says, "I want you to come with me." And we're like, "Where are we going?" Right? And my wife has her bag, and I've got my jacket and whatever. And he's like, no, leave your stuff, come with me. So we follow him through the restaurant. We pass someone who's like another kind of like maitre d' or like manager or something. And she goes, "Oh, are you taking them to the..." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm taking them." And she's like, "Okay, cool." So we walk by, we're like, "Where's he taking us?" Right? We kind of thought he was taking us to the kitchen. We were going to meet kitchen staff or something. We get in an elevator. Keep in mind, I've had a couple drinks. My wife's had a couple drinks, and we've got our little glasses of champagne. We go up the elevator, opens up into a dark, like an overflow room, almost like a bit of a conference room or something, like a banquet room maybe. It's dark. There's a bar at the end, and he takes us out, opens up the doors. We walk out on the deck, and we've got the deck to ourselves, and there is the Empire State Building lit up in red, white, and blue for July 4th. And he goes, "Folks, this is yours. Enjoy. Take your time. Come down when you're ready. Enjoy your champagne." And he leaves us. And there we are, basically on the roof of the Nomad, looking up as the lights are changing on the Empire State Building. And, maybe if you're from New York and you spend a bunch of time in New York, maybe that's not that big of a deal. When it's your 20th anniversary and you're from, kind of small town Canada, man, It was mind-blowing. And my wife and I just looked at each other. We're like, is this happening, right? And it was just so incredible. It was just like this, to my point earlier about bringing it into focus. I will never forget that trip to Manhattan, to New York, because of that event, right? I will just never. It was possibly the greatest meal of our lives. It was expensive, I'll tell you that, but it was amazing, and it all came because we were willing to talk to strangers, and we were sort of putting ourselves out there to talk to people. And the point before where you don't talk to people because you think you're going to be boring, well, we're potentially boring too, but by putting ourselves out there, we just got so much feedback. We had people coming to want to talk to us, coming to, and people going out of their way to help us. It was magical. So that's it. That's Coffee at the Crossroads. Talk to strangers. Put those fears and those things, to the side, and just give it a go. Start with a hello, right? Just a smile and a hello. That can be the first sort of catalyst to doing it. But anyway, that's it. If you like this, give me the thumbs up. Click the little subscribe button, and join me for more videos. There should be a video popping up here. Maybe there's something you want to watch. And leave a comment and all that great stuff. But until next time, thank you from Coffee at the Crossroads. Cheers.